Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about the Extrude Tool, and we're going to be drawing this object here, which is 4.2. And if you take a look at Classroom, you're going to find the drawing for this activity in there. Sorry, just trying to get it right. So we're going to be drawing this object. It's basically like a 2-inch cube. It's 2 inches long, it's 2 inches high, and it's 2 inches deep. It's not exactly a cube because it has this little bump out on here. And as you can see, the bump out on the side, like this piece right here, when we look at these two dimensions up top, it tells us that from the front to the back, it's 2 inches. And from the back to like this nub here, it's 2.5 inches. So if we subtract those two numbers, 2.5 minus 2, we know that the distance between this point here and this point here is 1/2 inch. That thing there is a square when we look at the right side, and that is 1/2 inch in from each wall. That gives us like 1 inch for each of those pieces in total, right? 2 inches minus 1/2 inch minus 1/2 inch says that the length there is 1. Then at the top view, we have a circle, which is being cut all the way through the object from the top to the bottom, which we can see in these hidden lines here in the front and in the side. And that has a diameter of 1.25 inches. And it's located 1 inch up and 1 inch over. Okay, now once we get more familiar with the program, we'll be starting this stuff off from scratch. But for today, I actually have a starting point laid out for you guys. So when you go to your Onshape and you go to Documents, you should see a document that's named 4.2 Start Point. Okay, when you open that again, that's going to be a read-only document. Mine's not, but yours will be. So you're going to go up to the hamburger, and you're going to say Copy Workspace, and you're going to rename it to like just 4.2. You can even get rid of like the Start Point portion of that. And then you're going to be in a document that looks just like this. And again, we're going to see all of these tools at the top. So let me open up my right file and then we'll get to it here. Okay, so here's my file, which is exactly what you guys are looking at too. I've just made a copy of that so I can edit this. And we have this cube here, and again, it's a 2-inch cube. So each of these dimensions is equal to 2 inches. And a few things to note here. When we look at this thing from the front, we can see these planes, okay, are like an isometric Shift 7. An isometric view, we can see that this thing is basically on the corner or the intersection of the right, the front, and above the top view. Okay, you can see that the block is positioned in between those pieces. So when I look at the front view, I'm in quadrant 1 of my graph. And my square is starting on what's called the origin, where the Y and the X orientation meet. It's also, when we look at this thing from the right side, it's in front of the front plane, which is this plane right here. Okay, so when we look at this, we have this object. Now the first thing, like after we've kind of initially set up our object, looking at these planes is unnecessary, really, most of the time at least. So what we're going to do is we're going to not delete those planes, but we're going to hide the planes so that they're not visible. So over here on the left, we have our default geometry. I want you to select top, and you can right click and say hide. I want you to click on front, right click and say hide, and right click and say hide. Okay, we can hide those 3 views. The other thing we can do, if I undo, Control Z is undo. You can also push like the undo button up here. I can also select the top, hold my shift key rather down, and then select right, and a shift key will select everything in between, and we can just right click and say hide, and we can hide all 3 at the same time. Okay, So again, when we go through and we take a look at our drawing, this is the front view of our drawing. Okay, the front view is always the view in the bottom left corner. So we want to make sure that as we go through and draw the actual object, that we're starting on the right side. Okay, there's not that much going on in the front view actually. We just kind of see things that are being created in our top view and our right view. So we really want to start with one of these two views before the other. We're going to start with the right view to begin with today because I'm going to teach you how to make a rectangle before I teach you how to make a circle. So we're just going to start with the right view to begin with. So as we then go through here, we want to make sure that we're going to start sketching on the right side of the object. So I'm just going to flip over to the right side of the object. I'm going to zoom out by either my mouse wheel or by 2 fingers on the trackpad up and down, okay, without clicking. Remember, when you click on the trackpad with 2 fingers, I can't do it on my Windows machine, but on your Chrome machine, that's going to be like rotating it like this. But anyways, we want to be directly on the right side. We're going to say sketch, and we're going to create a new sketch on this plane. Okay, so I selected that box. So what we've done now is we've created a new sketch, which is called Sketch 2. We can see it over here, and that's right on the surface of this box. So according to the drawing again, we have this other rectangle, it's actually a square, that's 1/2 inch away from the walls of this object. So we can either type G for the short key, or you can select the corner rectangle tool, and we're going to push the dot, and we're going to come down, and we're going to push a click again down here. Okay, we've just created a random size square roughly in the right spot. Okay, it's roughly like centered in this box. So because this thing is already like highlighted, it's got the white behind it, I can simply just type in, let's say like 1 inch, which is the size of this box, and then hit enter. And then down here I can also type 1 and hit enter. Okay? But like let's say that you created your box, but you didn't put those dimensions in. That's okay. We can pull up our dimension tool by selecting, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, we can either select the dimension tool there, or we can hit D for dimension, which is what I do and why I can't find the tool. And we can like select parts to dimension. So I can either select my line, and I can say that this is 1 inch. I can select my 2 endpoints and say that this is 1 inch. I also could select 2 lines, like this line here and this line here, and I can define that over there. Okay, so in order to do that, again, I hit D for dimension, I click on a line, I click on another line, that gives me this thing here, and then I bring my dimension and I click to drop it. Okay, now that it's highlighted, I can type and I can edit its dimension size. So each of those are 1 inch. And when I go through to dimension, which I just got out of the tool, when I go through to dimension between here and here, I'm going to set that to be 0.5. And when I dimension from here to here, I'm going to set that at 0.5 also. Okay, so if you're 1/2 inch away from this side and we add 1 inch, then you're left with 1/2 inch over here. The other thing that we could do if we wanted to is delete that number and dimension between here and here. 0.5. Okay, so enter. So we're good there. We've positioned that box, and again, when we go to look at like our drawing, we've got this box. It's 1 inch long here, and it's 1/2 inch from all the walls, so we're good there. So it's time to finish our sketch by clicking that check mark. We're going to go into isometric view, so Shift and 7, and we're at this point here. Okay, so we've created at this point a sketch. Sketches are 2-dimensional objects. Features are 3-dimensional objects. Okay, so sketches are 2-dimensional, features are 3-dimensional. In order to create features, we always need to start with a sketch that's going to define our feature. So today we're going to learn about one feature, and it's called the Extrude Tool. which you used a little bit yesterday, but we're going to just go into this a little bit deeper today. So when we select the Extrude tool up here, which is also Shift and E for the shortcut, it tells us, okay, we're creating the second extrude. The first extrude created the cube, which I've already given you. Now we're creating our second extrude. So the first thing that it needs is it needs the face and the sketch region to extrude. Okay, so that in this case is the square that we have just drawn. We also could select like the opposite of the square that we just drew out here. So if I selected that, see now it's not extruding the square, but it's extruding everything else. If I hit undo, I can Control Z, I can undo that. We want to select this surface here. Okay, and we can extrude this thing out. So let's talk, a little bit about like, here we're going to add material onto the object. Okay, we could also remove material, which we're going to talk about in our next surface. But here we're going to add. So when we go through to add this, we can say what the depth of our extrusion is going to be, which is how far out it's coming. Okay, so according to the drawing, again, the depth of this nub here is 1/2 inch. It's between 2 and 2.5, so it's 1/2 inch. So for my depth here, I'm going to set that to be 0.5. Okay, and when I click the check mark, it's going to resize that object so it's 1/2 inch out. Okay, now we're going to move on to the top. All right, we're going to put the circle in the top. So again, the circle up top is 1.25 inch diameter, and it's centered 1 inch from each edge. So once again, as I go through this, I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to select my top surface. Okay, and again, it's really important that you always, whatever surface you want to sketch on, that you rotate to that surface using either the shortcut keys on the keyboard or using the isometric cube in the program itself. So here we're going to use the circle tool, which the shortcut is C. So I'm going to type in C. And for right now, I'm just going to click and I'm going to create a circle. Okay, so I click, I bring it out. Again, I want to get it roughly to the right size and position. I'm going to click again. Now I can edit the dimension. And just like before, if you still have that box up, we can type 1.25 and enter, and it will put a diameter in there. Or we can hit the D key to dimension, and we can do the same thing. Okay, either way works. We also need to position this thing off of the two walls. Okay, so I'm going to dimension between here and the center point of the circle. And according to the drawing, that should be 1 inch away. And according to the drawing, it's also 1 inch up. So I'm going to position both of those. And then I'm done with that. So I'm going to click the check mark. And I'm going to do Shift and 7. And I'm going to cut that thing through. Okay, so we're going to do, again, the Extrude tool. So again, we need to select the faces and the regions that we want to extrude. So we want to extrude the circle. Okay, but there's going to be a few things that change here. So A, we're adding right now, but we want to actually cut away. So that's going to be called a remove. Okay, and at this point, we can start to see that this hole is being cut down. It's only being cut down 1 inch through the object, okay? And our object, according to the drawing again, this thing should go all the way through. You can see that by the hidden lines here in the front. So all the way through is 2 inches. So in order to do this, we can do two things. The first thing, which is 90% correct, we can simply set the depth to be 2 inches, and we can click the check mark, and that'll put the hole all the way through. Okay? But the problem with that is, like, let's say that we realize later on that we wanted to change the size of this object, and instead of it being 2 inches tall, we wanted it to be like 3 inches tall. But we still wanted that hole to go all the way through. At this point, that hole is still stopped at 2 inches down. So that's, the disadvantage to putting an extrude at a specific height when you want to go through an object. The other thing we can do when we go to extrude is we can remove this surface, but instead of going a specific depth, where it says here end type blind, if we select, there's lots of different options, which we'll talk more about these later on, but if we select through all, the hole goes all the way from the top to the bottom. Okay? Same thing before as cutting 2 inches through, but the difference is if I go and change this number to be 3, my hole extrusion is still all the way through the object because it's been defined like that. Okay, so my hole has not been screwed up by changing the overall size because I selected a through all. So that's the main advantage to the through all there. Okay, so at the end of this object, you should have something that looks like this. And when you're done with it, again, you're going to say share. So you're going to share this with brian.ashine@nccsk12.org. And you want to make sure to give me edit permission so that if there's something wrong, I can actually change it for you or help you with it along the way. Okay? So you're going to share that with me, and then I'll just double check that for you. Okay? As far as the next activity is concerned, we have a similar kind of looking activity here. I've given you again this object. On the front of this object, we have a rectangle that's going to be extruded outwards 1/2 inch. And in the top of this object, we have a rectangle that is going to be cut through the object from the top to the bottom. When you go to set this thing up and run it by me here, again, I've started and I've shared that with you, so you should be able to find 4.3 starting point. You're going to save that as, by again going to the hamburger and say copy workspace. And then you're going to share, before you even really begin, I want you to share that with me, okay? That way if you have issues along the way and you're like, Mr. Ash, I'm having trouble, I can go in and check your work and I can actually help you edit it, or we can work on it together to help get you caught up. Okay, so again with 4.3, by the end, it's going to look something like this. Okay, something like that right there, where we have this little nub. And then again from the top, it's going to go all the way through. Okay, and again, when you look at this, make sure you're selecting the right start points. Make sure that this is your front view. This is your top view. Okay, nothing's really happening on the right side here. Okay, that is the extrude lesson here for today. You guys work on 4.2 and 4.3.